So when I saw the episode about the racial wealth gap from the Netflix series Explained, Season 1, Episode 1, a number of things made an impression upon me. I think the first one was, right in the beginning, they said, here's a quote, just over 150 years ago, this was money for almost half of America. On multiple bills, people were picking cotton, enslaved people. These slaves didn't just represent wealth in America, they were wealth. By 1863, they were worth over $3 billion. I mean, that's like profound. You're talking about the difference between different groups of in America, their ability to accumulate wealth. Well, one group was wealth. So that's just really deep. Another thing that made an impression upon me was Abraham Lincoln. When the Civil War ended, there was a plan, to give former slaves 40 acres of tillable land, which means land that can be farmed. And it was set up, and the day before his second inauguration, Lincoln signed a bill that would make it official. And it says here, that there's a quote, America was almost a very different country. But it didn't turn out that way. Weeks later, Lincoln was dead. So imagine how things might have been different if Lincoln had not been assassinated. Because his successor was Andrew Johnson, and he reversed the policy. And so this brings us today to this idea of reparations, which people have very strong feelings about, people who support it and people who don't support it. When you talk about giving a large amount of money to one group, the other people are like, well, what about me? But it's extremely complicated. This is a really, really complicated issue, and I highly recommend you watch the episode and think about it. Think about what's being talked about, what's being discussed in this episode. I mean, it's one thing to set the slaves free, right? But African Americans were slaves for 246 years. The wealth that they were, the wealth that they created, the wealth that they generated for their masters was kept by the former slaveholders. So how do you fix that? I mean, it's one thing to be free, but you can't read, you can't write, you don't have any land, and the two groups are starting in totally different places. How are you going to get, equal opportunity? It's a really deep, deep episode. I highly recommend you watch it and think about it, and I look forward to going into it and discussing it with my students. Some real deep stuff here.